There we go. The red button is on. So I want to welcome also officially everybody in the future. This is always funny when I speak to those people who are like watching this in the future, to this first masterclass out of 6 masterclasses. It's like the biggest online event I've ever hosted. And am I nervous? No. Am I excited? Oh my God, yes. So my intention with this whole event, with all of these masterclasses, is that first of all, I want to make sure that if you're only able to join 1 or 2 or 3 of these 6 in total masterclasses, that in each masterclass you're walking away with something that truly creates a certain shift in your life, something that you can take away that will remain in your mind or in your heart or in your body and has a sustainable impact on your life. That's always my intention when I host something or I create something. And the second thing also is that if you like commit to watching all of these 6 classes, if you can make it live, if your time zone allows it, or if you are checking out the recordings afterwards, this is a very holistic thing. And I will be packaging all of these 6 masterclasses also in a free course afterwards. So it won't be called a 3-day event, but a 3-day course or a 6 masterclass course in the end. So you'll see as we move along this that there is like a bigger vision for all of this. And towards the end, towards the last master classes, we're bringing a certain closure to it. So in other words, all of these 6 classes will be kind of a short education program. That's also my intention. So if you're tuning in on 1 or 2 of these, you're going to receive some value. And if you're walking through the whole thing in the end, if you're doing live right now with me, or if you catch the recordings partially or fully, doesn't matter, right? There will be a big aha in the end, or a lot of ahas, I hope. So what awaits you inside of today's masterclass? Let me give you the little layout. The first thing that I want to do is I want to introduce myself to you all a little bit more in depth, that you know who I am, because we're sharing this time and space here in this room, right? And even though I can't see your faces right now because they're off, I know you're here. And this is a very different, oh, look at the doggy. Charlotte's doggy is here too, another participant, right? So that's exactly what I mean. Like, we're here, we can interact, you can use the chat, or you can even, there's even this little button here in the middle, down in the middle, it's like a hand, and it's called raise hand button. So if you click that, I get a notification, and then I can say, oh, you had a question, or, I can interact with you. And I just value that because it comes closer to an in-person event, although we're in different parts of the world, right? So the first thing I said is I want to introduce myself a bit to you, and then I want to introduce you to this concept of elevated activism. Now, elevated activism, it starts obviously with my personal activism journey and all the experiences that I've had as a vegan activist, and also what has come up recently by speaking to all these different types of activists. And I intend to give you new perspectives on how activism in your life can take shape, what activism actually is at its core, because a lot of people, a lot of vegans think activism is going onto the streets and being a part of demonstrations, like this front on full energy present activism. But there's much more to activism than just that. So I want to kind of like widen this perspective. And then in a second and third step, I want to talk about mental health and mindfulness, since I think all of you are part of my Facebook group, the Vegan Mental Health and Mindfulness Academy. You kind of know what's happening, you kind of know what's going on. And the important thing that I want to create today is I want to help all of us build this bridge. Charlotte says, great, thank you. I want to help all of you build this bridge of how important it is to have mental health in our life, obviously, especially as vegan activists, or just as vegans. If you don't identify as an activist, that might change today, actually. But how important mental health is, and what we can do via mindfulness to support our mental health. And with that support, there's a direct triangle link: mental health, activism, vegan activism, and mindfulness, how they support each other, and they can make us remain in the game as an activist and as a vegan. Well, as a vegan isn't that hard. If you're an ethical vegan, you're probably that for a lifetime. Most of us are. But like how we can maintain ourselves in this world, which isn't fully vegan yet or not vegan dominated. Just have to think if I want to use that word. Dominated, vegan dominated world. Big word. Right? And then at the end, I'm going to introduce you to the masterclass I'll be hosting tomorrow, for me tomorrow, maybe for you tonight, depending on your time zone, which will be meditation. A deep dive into meditation is the next masterclass. So that's what awaits you in this masterclass today, right? So my name's June. Surprise. My name's June. I do live on Bali at this day and time, this day and age. I grew up in Switzerland, though. So I come from a complete different country, a different culture. But when I take a look at what's happening in the animal rights section of both of these countries, it's very similar. So Switzerland is the country of cheese. It's the country of milk chocolate. We have fondue chinoise, which is like a meat fondue. It's a very, very animal product oriented country. And so is Indonesia, because Indonesia has been growing their meat farming over the past years. And obviously what you see when you Google Bali or Indonesia is all these beautiful rice fields and these beautiful beaches. You know, they don't show the plastic problems that we're having here. And also they don't show how exposed the whole animal agriculture part of it is. So when I walk around here, I see cars with open rusty cages with chickens and with pigs in them, and they're just about to be slaughtered. So it's extremely exposed, and that's a massive contrast from European countries, or sometimes US, the States as well. They're really good at hiding that, and here we're very exposed. But bottom line is the same things are going on, just in a different level of visibility. Now, I moved here obviously not because I was in love with that. I moved here because I'm a surfer. I love the ocean. I love surfing. I'm really, really dedicated to that kind of activity because it connects me with nature. I also moved here because I knew and I discovered that on Bali, a lot of these weird gurus are coming to this island. Like a lot of these people that have something to teach and something to preach about, you know? And I was extremely I was in a shitty place when I was living in Switzerland for my late teen years and my early adulthood. So with a shitty place, I mean, I know what it's like to be in deep depression. I know what it's like to be in suicidal episodes that are longer than just a couple of months. And I know what it's like to be excluded from almost anything you would like to be a part of because of anxiety. So I've been there and I've lived through all of these states and stages and episodes, whatever you want to call them. And obviously Switzerland wasn't to blame for it, partially though a bit, because I wasn't in my environment. I wanted a tropical environment. I wanted the beach. I wanted to surf. I wanted to create a life where I'm the administrator and I'm not the owner, where I administrate belongings and I'm not attached to them, where I have a certain sense of freedom or a feeling of freedom. So I was seeking that so deeply that I decided um, to just let go of a lot of security. So Switzerland is a very secure country. We have laws and rules for everything. You're set up well. I studied graphic design. That's like my previous background before I got into coaching. I studied graphic design and I worked in that field for, I think, a year and a half. And then after some point, I was like, I'm always in an office. I'm always staring into a screen. Yes, I get to be creative, but at the same time, people are changing my creations. And I didn't feel fulfilled with that. I didn't feel fulfilled with living in winters. Today, I see it a bit differently. I'm at a different stage in my life where I can live in different environments. But back then, I wasn't. I was just emotionally not okay. And I couldn't handle that. And then veganism came along and I was like, holy fuck, I gotta go vegan. And then even more challenges started showing up, you know, like the whole frustration of seeing what's actually going on, the whole anger that came up with that, the deep sadness that was triggered often night times when everything was quiet and I had to hear my voices in my mind. And they were just often coming from sadness, from frustration, from a darker place, from a hopeless place, right? And so after I educated as a graphic designer, worked in that field a bit, figured out that I didn't want to do that, I kind of step by step moved myself towards moving out of Switzerland. And obviously that took some years. I'm not going to open that whole book, but it took some years to figure out how to sign myself out of my own country and to move into another country, etc., etc. Eventually I figured out, okay, I want to end up in Indonesia, and I chose the south of Bali because the waves here are the best. There's not too many people. I tend to be more introverted than extroverted, which a lot of people don't believe because they see me talk online and see me talk in like public spaces, but I value my own me time a lot, right? Let me know if you're like currently tending to be more extrovert or introvert. The reason why I'm saying currently is because I believe it changes with us changing. You more intro or more extroverted this moment in time? Let me know in the comments. I don't know why I pointed downwards. I think for you it's also on the right. Maybe it's down. I don't know. You know the comments. Introvert mostly, Charlotte. Yeah. It depends, L. Yeah, it's very fluid, right? It's a very fluid state of living, of being engaged with the surroundings. Anyway, so about 2 years ago, I've struggled through a life of being a freelance designer. The architect says introvert. Okay, thanks for sharing. 2 years ago, a bit more now actually, I decided that instead of struggling through a life of freelance graphic design, I had so much competition, especially in the Asian and Indian market, because a lot of amazing designers came forward online on online platforms where they would just snatch those jobs for small money because they just had a lot of small work and they didn't charge that much. And me with like a 4+ year education in Switzerland, I obviously wanted to charge more, but people would choose the cheaper option, which was high quality as well, I have to say. So I decided that I was done with that. A lot of frustration again, I was like, gosh, ugh. My mental health at the time was way better because when I came to Bali, I started studying yoga, mindfulness, breath work, and I integrated these practices into my daily life, which has helped me to be more balanced and happy within, and to release the deep and dark depressions and anxiety that I was feeling. And I haven't struggled from any suicidal episodes anymore, thanks to those practices, which I'll be introducing in the further on masterclasses of this 6-day this 3-day 6 masterclass event, right? Anyway, so I decided to follow this calling, and the calling came in shape of voices from people that I knew. And those people were asking me questions. So people were asking me, how come you're always so balanced? How come you're always so happy? You have such a sparkly energy. What is it that you do? And that just kept going and kept going. At some point, I was like, I've got something to share here that I've been holding back to share. Shall I step into that responsibility? And obviously, I was still doing vegan activism. I was still preaching for veganism, and I was still on the streets here and there. Well, there was a phase where I just had to like take myself out of demonstrations for my own mental health, and that was before I learned all these mindfulness practices. But when I lived in Bali, I realized, okay, me practicing and deepening this whole mindfulness thing, it brings me into a space where I can show up more. And I wanted to bring that more forward. So I searched for solutions. I searched for ways to create something where I could share what is happening on my inside, where I could share how I do this. And with this, I mean life, living, loving, being joyful, happy, or at least real with oneself, right? Like ditching all those layers of fakeness and lying to myself and becoming truly, truly authentic. I had to find ways to do that. And the way for me was to build a coaching business. And I was like, well, I ain't got the skills of any of this. So what do? I started taking courses. I went into retreats. I took workshops. I just learned from all the corners that I resonated with and I vibed with. I picked mentors according to their moral values and to how they would live. And I was like, you teach me. Thank you. Yeah, you cost? Great. I'm willing to invest in that. I'm just done with fighting as a freelancer. I'm done with fighting with my mental health. So I chose mentors out there that I resonated with, that I liked their energy. And I was like, do you have something to offer for me? And if so, please let me be a part of this. How much does it cost? And so I went into this whole new mindset of the biggest money that I invested was not in material belongings anymore. It was not in new video games. I used to be a video game addict, by the way. That's another part of my story. But I started investing in the next step. I started investing in people that could help me get to the next step. And I saved money for that, and almost only for that. And that's what brought me to be in a place today where I have been able to create an online presence and a business where I can like serve my own community with my own unique gifts and talents. And it sparks me up. It sparks the people up that I work with. And it makes me be in love with what I can call work. And I haven't had that before either, really. So, yeah, that's basically a little bit of my life story, where I'm coming from, and why we're here today, right? Elevated activism. Elevated activism. I want to ask you all before I talk to you about it, because I know that some of you have been like taking a look at my content, you've been scrolling through my group. I want to ask you right now, when I say elevated activism, can you give me like some keywords, what you think of, or what you've already heard from my side or somebody else's side when you think of elevated activism? I'll give you a moment for that. Put that in the comments. I'm curious what comes up for you when you hear that. Charlotte says I resonate. Sue hasn't found her way back in again, huh? Or Sue. Yeah, that sucks. I'm like, sometimes I just can't help. I can't help people when it comes to technical difficulties. Okay. Oh, Connor is joining us. L, you're saying positive. Okay. Hey there, Connor. We're just in the middle of our masterclass on elevated activism. Thanks for joining in. I just asked the question. I just introduced what we're going to talk about. And I asked the question, what comes up in your mind if you hear the word elevated activism? And you can use the comment section of this chat room. There's like a comment section where we're already chatting in. You can use that comment section to answer the question, what comes up for you, or what terms come to mind when you hear elevated activism? Charlotte says activism from a state of positivity instead of anger. Yeah. Good one. So we have 2 times positivity. Right. Let's see if somebody else types something. Architect or Connor. Maybe Sue will join us in a minute. Let's see. Sue, my love, if you're watching this in the recording, I am so sorry that you dropped out. And I want you to know that this is still for you. I'm still talking to you in my mind as well. Freedom, 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 L. Yeah, freedom. And joy. Yeah. That's like, those are like the bigger pictures, right? They're like, we want freedom for everyone, including us. We don't want to be the sufferers, the ones that are digging in the dirt and being in a shitty place, whilst we want the best for the animals. We want the best for all, right? We want joy for all. Being elevated yourself. Yes, Charlotte, being elevated yourself, right? So let's take a look at how we can do that, huh? The first thing, obviously, is when it comes to being elevated yourself. And being able to show up as an elevated activist, which incorporates all the terms that you used so far, which are freedom, joy, positivity. Connor says, being the example that others may want to join. Yeah. So it's all about your vibration, the way your presence is. And that just inevitably comes from inside out. Like you can put 1,000 masks on, it's not gonna work. So we're not gonna talk about that, right? It comes from the inside out. And mental health work is the foundation of that. That's why I decided to start my business and call my coaching services mental health and mindfulness, because those of two, mindfulness we'll talk about in a minute, but those two go so hand in hand and support each other, that we just have to put some attention towards it, especially in our own communities as vegans and as vegan activists. Because when we manage to really get ourselves aligned from the inside out, then we also naturally manage to vibrate a certain presence, a certain energetic frequency towards the outside. And that shows up in every conversation you have online or offline. So if you manage to really take care of your mental health, then you also automatically will start choosing different words. You'll start choosing a different language. You will start listening more properly to what your opposites are saying. And with that, empower yourself and gift yourself with the ability to respond more straight to the point. Now, we all know that when we are talking about vegan activism, we have this classical debates about, yeah, but what about this and that? But it's hard to give up cheese. And we already have these automated responses in our mind for those classical questions, correct? So, like, I even know that there are lists online. I think We the Free has provided like a whole list, or they have outreach trainings where they educate on which responses you can bring when somebody has an objection, right? It's called objection management. But the thing that really leaves impact is when we are present with the opposite or the opposites. Could be that you're on a table with people, could be that you're in a one-on-one, could be that you're on the street doing activism in a one-on-one outreach conversation, or you're just talking on the phone to an old friend. It can be anything. If you really manage to be there present, right, and chilled and calmed, and we're using your breath, we're using mindfulness practices that you'll learn later on in this 3-day event, to stay in these states and to remain this compound place. Because if we can really listen and we can really pinpoint, hey, where's actually their block? We can ask them a question that helps them to unblock that resistance. Because I've talked to some people online. I have had some interviews, Connor, with you as well. I've had some interviews for my own podcast for different platforms. And one really beautiful thing that a friend of mine, her name's Mariquita Solis, she's also a vegan empowerment coach. You might know her. She said, like, to me, everybody is like a pre-vegan. And I said, like, yeah, I see them as not yet vegans, right? So most people on this planet, let's exclude the Eskimos, because obvious reasons, they are in the North Pole. So let's exclude them for this discussion. But when we look at the people that have the accessibility of vegan food in their hearts, I'd say, let's put the number out there, 97% of those people in their hearts, they want to be vegan. In their hearts, they want to be loving, compassionate, they want to be like that. And for us as activists, I think it's our job to give them the space to get there. And we can do that by actually having enough space inside of us. Now, if you're currently at a state in your life where you think, okay, I'm not balanced with my mind, my mental health is not at a great place, but I want to show up for the animals. I'm not okay, but I'm going to go to every demonstration I can. I think you're not doing, first of all, yourself a favor. And I also think you're not doing the cause a favor, because the energy and the presence that you're bringing into the space is already blocked because you are busy with your own internal processes, which need attention, care, and time, right? And so it's a question of not only honoring oneself. That's where mental health not only becomes about ourselves, but it becomes about a tool or a platform for us to even be more impactful in the moments where we intend to be impactful. Does that make sense so far? Let me know with a yes in the comments. Connor says you'd love her. Yeah, Marquita, she's an angel. I love her too. Very beautiful spirited being. Yep, makes sense so far. Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. Now, one thing that I observe when it comes to activism is that a lot of people, and I'm also talking about myself because I had a phase where I turned my back against activism. I was like, I'm not gonna talk about veganism. Leave me alone. I'm doing this for myself. Um, I'm done with it. Obviously, I wasn't done with veganism, but talking about it, being active, engaging in conversations, I was just not okay with it. So I turned my back to it, away from it. And that was, as I told you in my personal introduction, the phase where I really dove into mental health and mindfulness practices. So that I could come back into activism with this energy that I have today. And the thing with that is, as a vegan, and obviously we all live a lifetime. So the question is, are we in it for the long run? And can we maintain ourselves for the long run? Can we maintain our activity as an activist, as an advocate for animal rights, and whatever else you're advocating for? Huh? I don't want to exclude this to just vegan activism. I mean, I'm a queer man. I'm all over the rainbow. I'm for any kind of justice that could be identified as injustice these days. So whatever it is that you want to advocate for, obviously it takes energy, it takes your time, and you've got to make sure that you maintain your own energy so that you can be in it for the long run. Because picture this, somebody who's a full-time activist for 2 years compared to somebody who is like, let's call it a part-time activist who just engages like in 5 or 6 deep conversations a week or a couple of months, doesn't matter. And it also doesn't matter if it's online or offline. Imagine somebody who does that for a lifetime. How much more impact could that person have than somebody who's like in it for the quick sprint and then out again? Maybe even turns non-vegan after that because they're so burned out and not okay on the inside. They just listen to another guru who says, yeah, eating meat is great or whatever. So my kind of quest here is to make sure that all of us vegans, all of us activists are set up with the mental health tools and the mindfulness practices to maintain ourselves for the long run. Because a long lasting vegan activist equals long lasting impact in the world equals more animals that are living. Right. Right. So that's my quest. And that's why I see elevated activism as a concept from doing your inner work, elevate yourself so you can show up towards the outer world with more presence, inspirational, and impactful energy towards all the people around you, right? So that nobody ever has to like debate you again and you're going to get drained from that. Well, maybe you are some days, but you'll have the tools to really cope with those feelings that you're feeling and to release them instead of throwing them back in a heated debate. Because every time when you throw feelings around, they might reflect back to you and you're creating a kind of like upplay or like a ladder of fire instead of actually cooling down and finding a middle ground where you can really get to the core of the topic, which is like, do you care for animals? Do you really want to make a difference in this world? And if so, the steps aren't that big. What do you think those steps are? Like really get to those values of those people you're talking to. Elle says, yes, if activism ends up in hurting myself or someone else because I'm not emotionally ready, then that is not veganism to me. I want to minimize harm, starting with myself. Amen. Amen. And that's it. I bet most of us that turned vegan in this driving force of, yeah, I got to change the world. Yeah, I got to be an activist now. And I love that. I love that energy. But at the same time, we got to manage to get that energy into a container where we process it in a way that the activism we're doing is efficient. Because if we're throwing our own emotions into the activism debates and containers, and we create more heat, and we create separation. There's studies that show that when a mind shuts down is when they feel threatened. So we want to make sure that the people around us don't feel threatened by our vegan presence, but they feel welcomed by it, so that they're open to hear and to listen about what's going on and what the next steps could be and what the solutions are for the problem they are just discovering or have discovered and ignored for a while. I see you all are agreeing over here. Connor also, yes, agree with you. But as we everything else is we blah, blah, as with you, but as we everything else, if we wait till everything is perfect, nothing will get done. Not my best sentence, yeah. But I hear what you're saying. We don't have to be perfect. And look, the thing is, I think we're all perfect. I flip this concept around. I think perfectionism lies in what people think is imperfectionism. I think perfectionism is individuality and the facets that we bring to the table as human beings. That's what I truly believe. So turning vegan and being active, turning your back against being an activist doesn't mean you're going to work on yourself up until a point where you think you're perfect and then you're going to do activism again. That's not happening. It's not for me. Girl, I've got feelings, I've got emotions, I've got my crises as well, and I'm moving through them faster and faster as I understand my emotions better and better. And I know how to release them, work through these traumatic experiences using breath, mindfulness, meditation, movement practice, journaling, etc. So it's not a question of, okay, I'm going to process for a whole year and then I'm going to go back. It's more a question of, okay, I'm going to cocoon, I'm going to immerse. I'm really going to make sure I get myself onto a point where I'm just happy with myself. I don't have to see myself as perfect. Or maybe you agree with me and you're like, I'm perfect exactly where I'm at right now. I'm perfect with every step that I take right now. Even if I don't feel like it, I am. I am. I am. I am. I am. Right? We are perfectly imperfect. Do what we can when we can and are able. Exactly. That's what it is. And what I also think about emotions? The thing is, when we find a way to process them accordingly to how much processing they need, when we give them the time and space, it's often not that much time and space than we think. If we really know how to do it, we don't spend weeks on it. Sometimes we do, like I had a massive breakup and it took me 2 months to really process that shit after a 2.5 year relationship. But sometimes these emotions are processed faster than we actually think. And emotions are also felt faster than we actually think. So they come and leave faster than we actually think. And the beauty about this is if we have this clarity over our emotions and we don't need to throw them around, but we can bring them in consciously into our conversations, which is what we do in activism and outside activism. So if we bring in our emotions and we let somebody know, hey, in my perspective, seeing this feels like this. Seeing a cow get treated like that makes me feel these feelings. And if you're able to name that in a humble and non-judgmental or just an informative way, then that can be understood by the other person way more. So being in an emotional process doesn't mean you're not in your strength. It means you're actually creating your strength. Was that good? That just came through. Did you take note of that? What did I just say? Being in an emotional process doesn't mean that you're not in your strength. It actually means that you're creating your strength. Oh, that's a good one. I should take note of that. Happy this is recorded. Connor says, no, we only have to plant seeds and be the best example we can be. That's all. Only other people can change themselves. Exactly. Charlotte, I like that. That's good, man. Yeah, that just came through. Wow. Okay. Um, wow. Um, there was one more thing that just came to mind before that I want to speak about before we start finding closure in today's masterclass. Closure doesn't mean I'm just saying goodbye. It means that we're having a little chit chat circle and then we're finding a beautiful way to close the space. What was it? What was there? Oh yeah, the question. what's the right way to do activism? Or like, let's make this more interesting. What's the most efficient way to do activism? And I mean, that's a question that still a lot of activists and groups out there are discussing. I know that We the Free is starting to analyze with like a digital data structure. So every time when we go out on the beach and have conversations, we give out a card with a certain code, and then we can see how many people logged in, what did they watch, did they sign up to a Go Vegan challenge or not. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to understand what the most efficient way of activism actually is. We're not there yet. And I think that's a bit of a shame, but at the same time, really exciting to be a part of discovering and learning about that, right? But what I've realized, and what I think it boils down to always, is that when we choose to be active, we have to find our own zone of brilliance. And I mean, that doesn't only count for activism, that counts for anything where we put our heart and soul into. We got to find our zone of brilliance. And the zone of brilliance is a zone where we feel elevated and empowered. It's where we come in with our own uniqueness, our own talents, and refined characteristics, and we leave positive inspiration through just being ourselves like that. And I think that's the most impactful way of being an activist. And hear me out why. Because when you do that, you're going to be able to do that more often without feeling drained, without feeling bad, sad, overwhelmed, hopeless, frustrated, or angry. So if you find this zone of brilliance, and if you find these in different corners of what activism can look like, choose, you don't have to do everything. Like, we sometimes see these amazing Instagram influencers that make food, vegan food, and they have an amazing outreach, and here and there they share an animal rights story, and they have amazing impact because they reach a lot of people, and then we're so inspired we think this is what we have to do as well. But no, it's not our zone of brilliance. Or maybe it's about to become one of our zones of brilliance. But choose where you feel naturally impactful, where you feel naturally inspiring. When you can do that, like for me, so this is interesting. I used to be extremely anxious, right? And I used to be scared of speaking. I used to hate my voice when I was a teenager. That's another story. So for me, it took a lot of work to actually refine my voice and to come into a space where I would use it as a channel to do these things as I'm doing right now, speaking to the public, speaking in these spaces. And so for me, personal conversation, or especially group conversation, and when people are listening, like when I'm in a setting where I know, okay, people are paying attention to what words leave my lips, that's my zone of brilliance. And I figured that out. So my way of doing activism is I'm positioning myself when I'm in a conversation with a one-on-one. And I know people are walking by and they are kind of intrigued by the topic we're talking about. I open myself up towards them. So I speak off to those people as well. And they always leave there standing, and sometimes they enter the conversation. So I know my zone of brilliance is using my words to speak to a bigger crowd. And I try to apply that, and I actually start doing that naturally in the meanwhile when I have a conversation with somebody and other people are around, right? So this is where I leave most impact, right? And in spaces where I am just truly myself. Like when I'm ordering in a restaurant and I am just in love with the vegan food. If they don't only have vegan food, I'm going to praise that vegan dish to heaven. I'm going to tell them, please make more vegan food. It tastes so good. And I love it as a vegan. I love it when you make vegan food. So I praise that. I focus on that praising and I say, this is great. Please do more of that. I'd appreciate that. So these are little zones where I figured out that I feel home in. I do that almost naturally already, and it doesn't feel draining to me. Now, obviously, I still have debates going on, and I'm getting more refined in communication and stuff to handle these. But yeah, that will blow this masterclass here if we're also opening the communication masterclass that I sometimes host. Anyway, I think that's everything that I wanted to say about the concept of elevated activism. The three main things are being in it for the long run. And in order to do so, maintain mental health, through mindfulness practices. And mindfulness practices I'll be introducing in the next master classes that are to come this weekend. So as I already announced, we are having a meditation masterclass, which is the next one. Then we're having an anti-procrastination masterclass in which I'll be teaching you some tricks and a tool on how you can show up more without feeling overwhelmed and stressed, right? A very easy technique. And then we're having a breathwork masterclass, which is one of the most exciting ones because I know that meditation it's common. People talk about it. It's something common. But breathwork is something that's still a bit unresearched. So I'm really happy to also introduce you into the art of breathwork. And then we're closing this 3-day event with 2 beautiful classes. One is ecstatic dance, which is a movement medicine practice based on shamanic traditions, which I integrate into this practice. And that will be a very fun and playful one where we're not going to be sitting, where we're going to be standing, we're going to be moving our bodies. And you can have your cameras turned off for that as well, because you're going to be allowed to look weird and you're going to be allowed to make noises and stuff. It's a very, very freeing practice. And the last masterclass is about self-love commitments, right? So I hope to see you in the next one tomorrow. For me, it's tomorrow. Maybe for you, it's tonight. Elle says, I love dance. Yeah, me too. We know. I see you. I see you, hun. So, yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining in. If there's any question right now around the topic elevated activism, we can have some time together to zoom in on your question, and I'll see if I can give an on-point answer. And if not, maybe somebody else in this space here can. So if there's any question that you have, feel free to share it. And if not, feel free to just tune out and enjoy the rest of your day or night. One thing I actually would love to know before you go, if you intend to go, was there something in this masterclass that stood out for you so strongly that you remember it right now? Something that you took note of that you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. Or, okay, I've never seen it like this before. Was there something in this masterclass? If so, let me know. Put it in chat or turn your microphone on and let me know. The architect just left. Elle, sure. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak to us, or do you want to type in the comments? Both is fine.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think what stood out to me the most was just the idea of being in it for the long run rather than just a short period, and not just using, well, this is kind of my own thought on that, but not kind of using activist events as just for like attention or anything, but like seeing it as like a major part of your identity. And so you always are like elevated. It's not just when you go out to the Cube of Truth or whatever kind of activism you're doing, but like you're always carrying that with you.
Wow. Yeah, what a takeaway. And you summed it up so beautifully. I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. Anything else that stuck? Charlotte says, I have to think a little. Sure, love, go ahead. Let that mind spin. That was beautiful, right? That was like, wow. We've got another speaker in our circle today. She might not know yet. I'm curious who the architect was, aren't you? I don't know who that was. Just tuned in and put some chat comments, right? Yeah. Yeah. But the name, I don't know who the architect is. Maybe the constructor of everything here. Maybe it's my boss. Don't have a boss. Do I? I don't know. Yeah, right? They might tune in again. I think it might tune in again on another masterclass. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. It's gonna be the like, yeah, right? Like Sounds like Matrix, Connor says. Yeah, I think this is going to be like the little hidden challenge in this, like the behind the scenes insider challenge of this 3 day, the 3 day event. Who's the architect? Elle, go ahead, unmute yourself, love.
Okay, the other thing is when you talked about moving from Switzerland to Indonesia and how like the culture is the same, but it's also so vastly different because everybody or most people still eat meat, but in Switzerland it's more covered up, but in Bali it's like a little more obvious. And so I'm wondering how like just the activism might be a little bit different there because people are seeing animals in cages just on the street in certain places in the world. But like in my country in the US, like it's like probably like Switzerland as well, where it's like not so obvious.
Yeah, it's truly very covered up in these industrialized countries. And Indonesia hasn't had such a big, um, or hasn't been so affected by this whole industrialization. So it's still very, it's still very raw. It's still very like the trucks are just, they're old, and cages are cages, and they're just put on trucks. They don't put effort in it. And there is a good thing and a bad thing about it, because we can point it out easily. We can say, hey, you've seen these, right? So we often don't need footage to show what's going on. But at the same time, the local um, communities here and the local people, they are so used to it that they have gotten so blinded, um, and it just became such a normal thing to see. And even for me, I've seen it so many times. In the beginning, it broke me to pieces and I was crying on every scooter ride. And now, in a weird way, I've gotten used to it and it affects me less. It doesn't mean that I still feel the same way about it, but I've grown a certain layer of resilience towards being visually exposed to it. And I can imagine if you're like, for me as a vegan, I come from a different perspective. But if you're non-vegan and you just see it as the norm, it becomes a very deeply rooted part in your belief system and in your subconscious mind, where that's just programmed as a normal thing. And so getting somebody to realize that that's fucked up it's a deep conversation. And some locals are like very compassionate, and when you say it once, they open up immediately and they're like, okay, I'm gonna be vegetarian. But most locals, in my experience so far, are like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen this, okay. So there is this, we don't have the shock factor is not there. I think that's what I'm trying to say. We don't have an advantage of the shock factor of holy fuck, that's terrible, because it's exposed, mostly exposed, right? So I see that in the chat nothing else has been added on. Elle, your hand raising thing, that was from before, right? Yeah, I think that was the question before, or the input you had before. Anyway, I want to thank you, Connor. I want to thank you, Charlotte, and I want to thank you, Elle, for joining in live. Sue, because you joined in before. So Sue, speaking into the future now. You're watching the recording. I hope you love this. Let us know in the comments how you did. Connor also working. That's okay, Connor. Thank you so much for tuning in. As said, tomorrow, I think that is in exactly 14 hours from now on, I'll be going live again. And 2 hours before that, you'll receive an email with the invitation link to the Google Meet room, again, like today. I'll also post it inside of the Facebook event, so that there's like 2 channels where it's shared. And I hope to see you all in the meditation masterclass again. In the email, there will be some instructions on how you need to prepare yourself. It's actually quite simple. Just make sure you have some earphones and you're in a space where you're not getting disturbed by too many things. So Connor, if you're going to be working today, I don't recommend that you participate in the meditation, except if you can take a 30-minute break or a 45-minute break, and use that for our meditation practice. I'll introduce some foundational concepts on meditation, and then I'll guide you all through an experience so that you can just get to feel what I taught you. And I'm going to talk about the science of meditation. So like what's happening in the brain, what does it have to do with brain waves? How is the scientific point of view connecting to this often so spiritually labeled practice, right? So I think that's going to be interesting for all of us. Yeah. Thank you all for joining in. Feel free to say bye or love you or whatever you want to say, and I'll see you soon.